Good evening, campers, it's me, Kieran. Today we're going to talk about the wonderful world of structuralism. How very fancy. One thing that I want to start off with is that when we learn about structuralism, we generally also learn at the same time about deconstruction. They're basically siblings in the same late 20th century house. Structuralism and deconstruction can at times overlap, but for deconstruction I'm going to leave that in a separate video. Here we're only going to talk about structuralism. Structuralism began as a way to understand language, not as the words themselves, but as a system. Now, one of the cunning linguists that really spearheaded this movement of structuralism was Ferdinand de Saussure, or if you're really pretentious, Ferdinand de Saussure. We all know there's one student who really likes to over-egg the French, and that's okay, because that makes them an easy target. For simplicity's sake, Ferdinand thought that language was a code that was ultimately made up of signs. So these signs have two composing parts. The first one is the signifier, and if you're a graduate, you know the exact word I'm going to write down. It's this word, cat. The signifier is the word, it's the sound, it's what is produced by humans, cat. However, the second part of the signifier is the signified. When you hear that word, what comes in to mind? And for most people, you're going to think of a cat or pregnant Pikachu, who's really over like the second term. Morning sickness has not been great for that Pikachu. Alas! You say a word or you write a word, you look at it, and you think about what image is produced from that. Some of you are thinking, what happens if a word has multiple images? And indeed, Kurt Vonnegut is all about this. If you read Breakfast of Champions, you'll probably know this page, where there is a children's book about a beaver. And to the kids, it's very innocent. They have this image. But for the adults, they think it's funny because they're thinking of this. And indeed, a lot of this double entendre teenage humour relies on the unpredictability of what images could be provoked once we put them upon the written page. Does deconstruction also do this? Yes. Again, they kind of map and overlap with each other, but for structuralism, this is a problem that arises. Now we got to cut to everyone's favourite Roland Barthes. Yes, it's the same guy who did Death of the Author. He appears quite a lot, would you believe it? He's very influential. Barthes took this idea that we could hear or see a word and conjure up a lot of ideas and images and really cement that within literature. And ultimately said that the stories, the tales, the poems, the narratives that we are told inform the idea of what we're going to come out with at the end. The words, the language might be the same, but the ideas and the images are going to vastly differ based on what we have previously encountered and engaged with. Barthes' revolutionary theory doesn't actually sound that revolutionary today. Like, we know that books don't just appear out of nowhere. We know that authors are influenced by what has come before. There's no such true originality within literature, and therefore if you pick up any old book, we have Michel Faber's The Crimson Petal and the White, of which I have not read. Therefore, if I was to engage within this book that I've not read before in a structuralist manner, I would be looking at the words and what images and ideas they provoke. But if I wanted to probe deeper into a Barthesian structuralist viewpoint, I would be looking at how the language and the words that are used inform the cultural references being made, be it historical or contemporary. I would be looking at the word and language choice which informs its genre, and if it's conforming or distorting the view of the genre that Faber has written. And it's this, I would argue, is what structuralism is trying to do. It is not trying to purely say that meaning comes from a word or a book, but there is a structure and a relationship within books across a culture. Yes, across a culture, not a canon. And that's really important. Let's go back to the really cheap whiteboard. What image or idea comes to mind when you hear the word monster? And also, what does your culture inform is a monster? Or what does your culture say a monster could or has been? Now, it's this point about structuralism that takes it up a level. What does the culture say, be that historic or contemporary, about this word, and how does this word inform our idea or understanding, or also the image of the monster? Let's put some of that into practice. Let's talk about women. Let's go all the way back to the Greeks. Medusa. Medusa is a gorgon. She's also a monster. But how is she described? Is she a woman who defies norms? Is she scary, petrifying, beautiful, or too powerful? Medusa is actually all of those things, and structuralism really likes binaries and how things juxtapose with each other. If we look at historical classical works, or even if we look into more modern works such as Stone Blind by Natalie Hayes, the idea and image of Medusa sometimes buckles under our own presumptions of what Medusa is meant to be. If we go back to Bath, my understanding or image of Medusa is going to differ vastly to someone who has or has not engaged with Stone Blind. But it could be equally said that the idea and image of Medusa is going to differ from someone who's only read Stone Blind and has not read any of the works of Ovid or Hesiod. Let's keep these glasses on because I'm liking this feminist lens we're using. Let's think about another binary, nature versus nurture. Witches within European history are time and time again persecuted and demeaned because did they have magical powers, or were they unmarried spinsters who didn't want to conform to societal means? We can see this within older works, slightly newer works, and also newer works. Now, within these works, if they don't have the precise word of monster, there will be some phraseology of otherment. But again, we can use structuralism to see how authors and how language and how culture informs readers of their understanding. In fact, some of you, when you think about the word monster, you'll think about the other. And if we put on our colonial glasses, we can look at Chinua Achebe's work. We can also look at Joseph Conrad's work and see how the colonized and the colonizer view the colonizer and the colonized. And what does that say about our culture? And within our analysis, we can either keep it to the viewpoint of that time of when those books were created within that culture, or we can shift it to a more modernist perspective and see how those cultures don't map or conflict or conform with the culture of today. That would be a structuralist viewpoint of those works in many various different ways. Fully aware that when I've been talking about this, I've been using past examples and say, but now we can bring them to today's culture. Well, let's just stay with our culture and let's think about the word monster. We could think about big talking cultural moments that are currently going on, and I don't think they're going to end. Sometimes you do just have to go to the past to see how it can inform the present, and there's nothing wrong with that. Let's think about Frankenstein. And let's be honest, we're all reading the 1818 version. We're not reading the later one. If you've read the later one, I don't want to talk to you. 1818 or bust. Frankenstein's monster is the amalgamation of that which is natural and unnatural. It is the synergy between the machine and the human. We can use that today to talk about AI. And now we have a brand spanking new lens to view all the sci-fi works. But we can also use this today within the newspapers, within the articles, within the blog posts, within all the rebuttals against the use and the uplift in the use of AI, especially within the arts. AI is wonderful. It is helpful, it is intuitive, and it is efficient. But there is a panic that it is uncontrolled, it is unnatural, but it's also hindering. Structuralism looks for signs, and we need to look for binaries and differences. Knowing what something is not helps us to identify what it is. Okay, so AI is not natural, it's unnatural, wonderful, but it relies on natural input from humans. It's instantly bridging that gap. It's working on banks, which is all about human ingenuity and human backup. The internet is created by humans via code. It's humans' input that is informing its output. So who is the real monster in this situation? Now, what's really interesting here, what I hope will help cement the idea and the theory of structuralism, is that AI actually does the opposite to what a structuralist does. Both understand what the signifier is. It knows the word. It knows what that word is. But a structuralist understands the signified. It knows what it expects the context and the culture to dictate what that word is. AI can't do that. AI has to guess at roughly what you're trying to conjure out of it. AI within its current form cannot make that leap. It doesn't know based on the minimal inputs that you put in what the signified is going to be. And that indeed brings us to what we call in the business a pitfall. Is the link between the signified and the signifier, based on the fact that it changes with culture and with individuals and with experience, does it make the link arbitrary? Yes, but also very fittingly, no. The problem with structuralism is that readers pick up on existing patterns. And if you're very much used to a word meaning one certain thing and it coming up as an image, as an idea of one certain thing, structuralism doesn't really help you change that. Sometimes the signifier can reconfirm the signified to the individual. And I think the best analysis that comes out of structuralism is where you have a source material that upends or contradicts your initial viewpoint. But as we've said, even with the idea of witches, of the colonizers, of the colonizers, and also of Gorgons, they tend to fit within the grey space. They're not good nor bad in some circumstances, depending on the context. There is light and there is dark within the situation. There may be something brighter or murkier lying just underneath. And structuralism doesn't help readers get into that detail. You're forced to work between these two binaries, which at times can just feel arbitrary. And that's where we have the better sibling deconstruction to solve it all for us. But that's for a different video. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you understood a little bit more about structuralism. And let me know in the comments if you want anything else. Bye.